Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us for Demiplanar with B. Dave Walters. Today is a special occasion, a high holy day. Don't get me wrong, every time I get to spend time with our wonderful guests and with you is a great day, but today we have Mr. Jason Carl with us. That's all your fans screaming, Jason. That's yeah.
Hello, my friend, and thank you. You're going to make me, break character and smile here. I see you trying.
Here's the thing. Let me just say this up front, y'all, because I'm gonna get this out of the way now. I have such tremendous respect for Jason Carl. This man walks his talk in ways you will never know. He has used his power and influence to boost people and enable people, again, in both ways, obvious and non-obvious, and helped me personally live a dream of mine to get to represent from my beloved clan of kings, which he did not have to do, and I will be eternally indebted to you for that, sir. So thank you so very much. And I will just say, if you ever need an example to aspire towards or to look up to, it is Mr. Jason Carl.
Mr. Walters, how am I supposed to live up to that?
You've already done it.
Too
late.
I think that's too generous by half. But thank you.
Hey, so thank you again, for those of you that have been with us these past couple weeks. You know the deal. For those of you that are watching for the first time today, if you've got a question for Jason or me, about vampire, TTRPGs, about whatever, just put it in chat. Just write the word question in front of it, a capital question. We got somebody, the wonderful Megan will pull them out, and I have a list. If you see me looking over here, that's my questions. And
Thank you, Megan.
I will sprinkle them in at dramatically appropriate moments. So let's get to this, Jason. Word is, just today, there was an announcement of a special guest on this week's LA by Night.
I think those who are very familiar with LA by Night will not be surprised by the fact that from episode 1 of season 1, my hope, dream, goal has been to invite Matthew Mercer to join us as Beckett, the gangrel historian and sometimes archaeologist, and dare I say, nocturnal busybody that we all love from the World of Darkness's many, shall we say, escapades. But schedules being what they are, it just wasn't possible until now. And then finally, the stars aligned, and Matthew was able to join us at last to portray the character that, in my humble opinion, he was born to portray. It was a real joy to have Matthew with us for this week's episode. All of our NPC guests are astounding in their ability, their patience with me, their patience with the story. Well, we do things a little differently, perhaps, than the typical actual play, as you may have noticed. And that, I think, is a little challenging for people who don't play with us regularly. Everyone does their homework. I provide notes, I provide reading materials, various documents that I like people to read. And so that when they come onto the set to play their characters, they start from a base of knowledge that helps them be comfortable and get into the action really quickly. Matthew went above and beyond. He's already a fan of Beckett, a longtime fan of the character. So he already knew the role very well. But I gave him extra homework so that he would be up to speed on everything that had transpired on LA by Night for 5 seasons that Beckett might know about, because Beckett hears things, as you know. He hears things. And so that when Matthew arrived, first of all, I was blown away by the authenticity of his costume. His Beckett look is absolute perfection, extraordinarily convincing.
It is like he stepped off the page when he.
I was a little intimidated.
When he walked in, Beckett it out. It was just like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, okay. It's
Cuthbert's
it's
here.
it's 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 that story now, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
No
Mm-hmm.
pressure, no pressure.
Yeah, we're doing
Um,
that.
uh,
Let me again. Let me get my good rosary. It's never far away there. So.
I think it comes as no surprise to anyone in the family that Matthew is an extraordinarily generous player. Very, very skilled and talented, obviously, but very generous. And the way in which he managed an extraordinarily difficult scene as Beckett, several scenes actually,
Mhm.
was a joy to run as a storyteller because I didn't have to do anything, and a joy to watch too. For me, this is the fulfillment of a dream that I've always wanted to share with the family, and an amazing gift to them from Matthew.
I know a lot of people who watch this show. Their first introduction to Vampire the Masquerade has been our show, and they don't
Mm,
necessarily always know a lot of the greater subtext. Uh, Beckett is like a chronicler of kindred history. There is a book called
okay.
Beckett's Jihad Diary that kind of was a little bit of connective tissue and a manner of speaking between previous iterations of Vampire and V5,
Yes.
somewhat. And so a lot of the history of Vampire, a lot of it has come through the lens of Beckett. So that's kind of who this man is, a chronicler,
Mm-hmm.
a quasi mythical chronicler, because you get to, it's like an Indiana Jones thing where you're like, well, no one man can have done all those things. And then
Sure.
Indiana Jones walks in and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah.
I think for many younger kindred, Beckett, like his companions Lucita, Varagon, and Anatole of Clan Malkavian, is nearly mythical or
Mm-hmm.
legendary. They aren't sure whether or not he exists. And if he does exist, did he actually do all the things that he is said to have done? And how definitive is his point of view? The Jihad Diary is a great example of something that we call the unreliable narrator,
Mm-hmm.
which has been a really important design and creative pillar of Vampire since the very beginning. Everything in Vampire is told from particular points of view of various characters who often relate what they think or feel to be true from their point of view, but it makes objective truth very, very difficult to obtain. The lore is imperfect, and some things contradict one another. Beckett, I think, is a character who has seen this phenomenon and had decided to do what he could to create an objective point of view. But of course, Beckett is as flawed and imperfect as all kindred, as all individuals. And so we get his perception of what has occurred. Is it factual? Is it 100% accurate? Well, from his vantage point, yes. From the vantage point of what? An external, all seeing, all knowing audience eye? Perhaps not. I think
This
that's a strength of Vampire, a feature and not a bug.
this is something you and I have discussed, and I think a lot of
At
times
length.
at length, that a lot of times I think people don't realize that, because again, I ran my Patreon community for a while
Mm.
there. We played about 500 or 600 games of V5. Some of them are in chat right now. I see you, Sappin and Megan. But the idea that people get really invested in, well, this book says this, which in other games you can take that to the bank. That you're like, this source book
Sometimes,
said this, and
sometimes you can.
that's what it
Sure.
is. Yeah, in Vampire, it's like, not necessarily, not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily true.
Yeah.
Everything is from a distinct point of view. Now, obviously, in the tabletop role playing game books that we publish, there is objective information, but it's generally about the rules and
Mhm.
about how things work. And even then, they are not always 100% set in stone because, of course, we encourage every storyteller and every player to do what's right for them at their table. As long as everybody is having fun, as long as consent and safety is being observed and respected, and everyone's having a great time and wants more at the end of the session, you're doing it right. There isn't a definitive answer for everything. And I consider that a strength and not a weakness because it allows us to tell so many different kinds of stories with Vampire and through the lens of horror, which you know something about, I'm told.
The, at least I
I
continue to
hear it.
flail in its general
The,
direction there, you know.
these are things I hear. I
Yeah,
hear these things.
yes. You know that you led directly into one of the questions from our dear friend Murphy Pop Art, who's played Paisley, one of the greatest Malkavians I've ever been privileged to know.
Hello, Murphy.
What sort of vampire stories do you think have yet to be told but should be?
Wow, what an intriguing question.
Mm.
What an awesome question. The vampire myth has been with humanity for so long. We know it, of course, mostly through the story of Bram Stoker, that his evil fairy tale that was popularized in the late Victorian age. And since then, of course, the stories have proliferated and exploded, but they're far older than that. And they come in many different forms, shapes, and sizes. There are very few cultures that I'm aware of that do not have historically some version of this creature or creature type in them. And each of these stories tells a different, offers a different lesson about what it is to be human, not what it is to be a monster. So to get back to the core of the question, what do I think hasn't been told yet and should be told? I think that many people feel that vampires are passé or have said everything that they can say, but I don't think that's true. And I think the evidence of it is the fact that we never tire of stories told through this particular medium in this particular lens. If I could tell any vampire story that hasn't yet been told, I think it would probably be the story of vampires in the Elizabethan period. I mean, I'm aware of some short stories and maybe even a novel set there, but I think that that fascinating period under Queen Elizabeth I, which was the flowering of the English Renaissance and, of course, Shakespeare's time, told through the eyes of vampires would be quite astonishing.
I think for me, because again, you know, a lot of times people ask me questions like, you know, what's the thing you want to do that you haven't done yet? And I'm like, well, I get to do the things I want to do. So it's not like necessarily a long list of just like, oh, someday I hope. But I think, believe it or not, a vampire story I would want to tell and have teased a few times is a far future story. You know, what did the Ventru of the year 3000 look like? You know, something like that. It would be interesting to me. More.
I think it would be very challenging because, of course, you not only have to imagine the vampire of the future, but the people of the future, the humans that the vampire associates with. The vector of the story would be something that you'd have to imagine almost whole cloth. And you could not draw on the historicality of the world to help you. As an exercise in pure imagination, it would be a lot of fun, I think. Is the future like Babylon 5, or is it more like Star Trek? Is it, a chaotic free-for-all? Is it a desperate attempt to survive, like in the story Silent Running? Science fiction and vampires? Yeah, I agree. That's uncharted territory. Almost uncharted.
Almost uncharted territory. Yeah.
Almost uncharted territory.
Another question here from Spilbo Baggins that I would be remiss if I didn't ask is what is the best clan and why is it Ventru?
I mean,
I did not pay them. I did not pay Spilbo for that, but
well, let me say this about that. I find something to love and admire in all the clans.
Yes.
And my teammates at World of Darkness, brand team back in Stockholm, they don't believe I'm a Ventru anyway. So even though, in my heart, I know I am. Each clan has something to offer, and I don't think there is any clan I would not want to play or not want to include. Yeah. The reason I like the Ventru is I like their terrible story. They are a deeply flawed clan. They feel compelled to try to bring order from chaos, to try to serve, despite the fact that their service is inevitably corrupted by the beast. There can be no perfect leader in the world of darkness, particularly not for vampires. And so the idea of noblesse oblige meets fallen nobility is a very appealing story for me. I like that a lot. I never get tired of exploring different aspects of that particular tale. But
Yeah, I will tell
the
you.
honest truth is I do love all the things.
Yeah, it was some.
I can't help it.
Well, I did an interview this past weekend, and they were asking me, like, "What's your favorite clan?" It was the same thing. I was like, I do love them all. I've been blessed to get to play a lot of them as characters. I've played them all as NPCs, so yeah, I appreciate it. I think everybody knows that I bleed blue for the Clan of Kings. But I think people underestimate just how much I love Clan La Sombra, and have come to really love Nosferatu. I love
what is not to love.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
That was my second clan I ever played. The first was a gangrel who lived for about 60 minutes. And the second was a Nosferatu that I played for many years. And anyone who has watched Seattle by Night stream caught a glimpse of that character, Vincent Gravenstein. The Nosferatu, in many ways, have the most to teach us about humanity and about who we are, what we're capable of, both good and bad. Mm-hmm. They're endlessly fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Now, I realize some of these things, projects are in various states of production. There's always things you can or cannot say. But we did have Twitst84 did ask, are there any plans to continue Seattle by Night?
I think when the stars align, if things work out, absolutely, we would love to. It's a great story. It's a very different take on vampires. The tone of it is very different from LA by Night. The players are fantastic. And the tale, I think, that we told, if not unique, then really unexpected. I think we all want to see what Tom Hollandaise puts in his food processor next, of course. So the answer is, as always, yes. If things work out, if the stars align, if schedules and opportunity match up, would love to do more for that story.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's always wonderful when people are like, I want more of this thing, but there's so much goes into.
Don't we all?
Yeah, so much goes into it. Even trying to find the time where we were all going to shoot season 5 of LA by Night was difficult.
What a nightmare, right?
Yeah. But hey, it's good. It's good that there is an appetite for more, because a couple of people asked about. Rex Verde also threw in, and I think I saw another one asking about Seattle by Night. So that's
it's a great story. The players went all in, and they took the story in some very surprising directions. I had a tale I thought I wanted to tell, and as with LA by Night, many times I ended up throwing out those notes very early and just going with where the players wanted to take it. Those stories are very satisfying, maybe the most satisfying.
For people who aren't familiar with Seattle by Night, what's the elevator pitch of what that show was?
Wow, how to encapsulate what they did in 60 seconds. But let's put it like this: a coterie of unlikely allies are tasked by Fiorenza to achieve a goal for the Camarilla, in return for which they will be granted admission to the Ivory Tower if they succeed. And then shenanigans ensue. Yeah, and that's it's up on YouTube right now, though, right? There were people I know. I've shared the link repeatedly, but yeah, it's on the YouTube Penny Arcade channel. This was a project we did in association with our friends at Penny Arcade. The story is great. It's at once literary and terrifying and hilarious and poignant. I think we're all very proud of it.
That's the best way to do it. And, I won't say what the plan was, but this did happen on LA by Night, that it was supposed to be one thing, and at the end of episode 1 was no longer that thing. That's how it always goes.
I don't know why I even bothered to plan it.
A plan is just a list of things that don't happen, It
was supposed to be, we had a very, very different story in mind. And by the end of episode 1, it became immediately apparent that we were telling a very different story, and that the story that emerged, because emergent play is the best thing about tabletop RPGs, right? It's that collaborative emergent experience. You don't know where the story will go, and we play to find out what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found out was, yeah, this is a different story.
Mm-hmm. Quickly found that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had all these great notes, and
Yep. Although that actually that leads to another question that someone had on here. But for those of you that joined us late, if you have any questions for me, for Jason, anything TTRPG, vampire, put it in chat. Just put the word question in all caps in front of it so we can grab it and have it on our list.
Ask anything you want. I can't see the chat, only Dave can. So
that's fire away. And I'm lightly filtering the ones I know you won't answer. But this was from Art and Audio. Good friend Art and Audio does fantastic art. How much information do you give the actors playing NPCs, and how much do you leave up to them? Does that change with different NPCs like Strikes or Vannevar?
It absolutely changes by different NPC. And we never know, because of scheduling, because it's so difficult to get schedules to align, especially if we have to pre-record. We can't assume that anybody will be able to come back in any given time period. It might be the only chance we get during a given season to see that character. So we have to be very thorough in our preparations. And of course, it does depend on who they are and what they're there to do. Each NPC player receives a character sheet, a background that I've created, and then a set of goals. Here are the things I would like you to accomplish tonight, if you can. How you do that, totally up to you, which you would think I would learn from, but not. But I prefer it that way. I don't know how they will approach achieving their goals or pursuing them, and I don't know if they will succeed either, which I find lends itself to that emergent collaborative play that I was discussing. Some characters need more information than others. Characters that are in a position of leadership, that have the ability to hold the power of life and death over others, or who command, in vampiric terms at least, followers or staff or minions, need a little bit more information about who works for them and what is possible, what they can and cannot do. Mm-hmm. But that said, every single person we've invited to join us to play an NPC, has gone far above and beyond the call of any possible duty that they might have as participants. They do their own research. They ask fantastic questions. They propose storylines, and they quickly make these characters their own. I think a great example is Vannevar and Suzanne, played by Brian and Amelia. We had some very specific information for them the first time they appeared, because Vannevar is an established character in the World of Darkness. Suzanne, we created completely out of whole cloth. I provided this information to them, and they made these characters their own instantly. And I just needed to sit back and, adjudicate what the World of Darkness wanted.
Which you're quite right in, and I'm aware, again, not gonna bust anybody out completely, but there's times we had guests that it's like, oh, we were heading east and they're like south, and it's like, oh, okay, stories go south now.
That's okay though. That's the beauty of tabletop role-playing games. I've been involved with these games almost all of my adult life, mm-hmm. in one way or another, and I think that the value of them is clear, I think, to all of us now, especially now in this time and place that we live in. But the concept that you can create on the fly a story with your friends that can go in any different direction at any given moment, very powerful, I think. And I think it's beneficial to people. I think tabletop RPGs do a lot of good in the world.
Absolutely. I've said this before, which is why, because I love video games, but video games will never completely eliminate TTRPGs ever, no matter how.
I doubt it.
No matter how good the AI gets, no matter how big the sandbox gets, there's still those moments of, we're gonna tie the prince's shoelaces together and jump out the window.
Or shove the sheriff off the roof of the parking garage.
As one does. I felt completely valid. Maybe do it Maybe turn off your live stream before you do that. No,
Maybe.
we do have. I mean, or maybe don't. Maybe don't. Yeah. We do have a few more LA by Night questions, but you just brought up something I wanted to ask you about there. You said you've been doing this for your entire adult life. I mean, I know many of our friends and members of the family here might have only become aware of your work in 2018 when LA by Night started, or in late 2017 when we did the Chair D20 game for Satine, which was the first time we met.
Right.
And the first time I ever played on stream in that game. But
Me too. I'd never gone in front of a live stream in my life before that, much less told a story in front of one. It was terrifying.
Hey, but we got it done. Apparently, it worked out. But you know, how long have you been working? I'll combine the two questions. How long have you been working in TTRPGs, and how'd you get started? Because I know this, but you know, I don't think the people do.
I mean, once you pass the age of 100, you stop counting.
True.
It doesn't matter anymore.
Becomes burdensome. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've been working in tabletop RPGs since, I mean, the year doesn't matter specifically. I think the first thing I ever worked on was Vampire: The Dark Ages, dark medieval vampire tabletop book called
My favorite.
Liege, Lord, and Lackey, which was all about ghouls and mortal servitors in the dark medieval night.
I want you to know, right over there on my bookshelf, I have Liege, Lord, and Lackey. And if it were a little closer, I would run and get it. But it's right over there. Yep.
What is wrong with you?
Now I need to get it. I need to get it signed. I need to get it autographed.
I think. Oh yeah. I think that was the first thing I did. Coincidentally, I worked on it with our creative lead, who is Justin Akili, who is now our creative lead at World of Darkness. He was working on Vampire: The Dark Ages at the time, and brought me on as a freelancer to write a chapter or two of that. From there, I worked extensively on a product line for the World of Darkness called Mind's Eye Theater, which was live action role playing LARP, a particular passion of mine. And I contributed to in a lot of Mind's Eye Theater books, mostly vampire, but some others as well. And I found that live action role playing really helped inform my tabletop role playing, and vice versa. I don't know what you mean. I think this was the sign for I'm in the Umbra or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe I'm invisible. I don't recall.
I mean, it's a bit of both, really, when you're in the Umbra. But yes,
the Umbra is basically a giant mystical gym locker anyway, so you might as well be invisible. Or it used to be.
Used to be. I don't know if it is
anymore. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, where it is, it's a tough time in the Umbra, but okay.
I think I'll let Justin discuss that when he has the opportunity. From there, I went to work at a little company in near Seattle called Wizards of the Coast. It was small and relatively unknown at the time. Did some really amazing things there. I worked on Magic the Gathering in various capacities, mostly in the organized play division, essentially setting up a tournament structure for Magic the Gathering so that people could play in an organized way at their local game store, or they could play at a professional level. We call it the Pro Tour at the time. Eventually, though, Wizards of the Coast brought Dungeons and Dragons under its roof, and I made the switch from Magic the Gathering to Dungeons and Dragons. By then, I'd been writing for Vampire a lot, and I worked on the Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition team. But I never stopped working on Vampire all this time. It's been a constant. For a number of years, I owned a company called By Night Studios, which was a Mind's Eye Theater live action role playing publisher. We were a licensee of Vampire the Masquerade of the World of Darkness. From there, I went on to work for the brand, which is what I do now. That was a longer answer than you wanted, I think.
No,
but when you have to cover 100 years, it takes a while.
That was the precise
century,
answer I wanted. Yeah, it's true. I mean, again, you just have the ghouls keep the records, and just keep moving forward. That's my motto. Then the hardest part about all of it is then having to fake your death on occasion and come back, and then but
Yeah, the paperwork gets pretty incredible. It takes at least 2 or 3 days now. Every time you do it.
Again, we are of course joking. Vampires are not real, so
they don't exist.
So we have a number of questions that have come in. So I'm a detour slightly over here to the questions a little bit.
If they're about D&D third edition, my memory is imperfect.
Sword and Fist you did, isn't it?
I did. I worked on a book called Sword and Fist. I think it might have been was it my first assignment? No, my first assignment was the third edition monster manual. I contributed a lot of monsters to it along with the chief developer, Skip Williams. It was really my introduction to designing Dungeons and Dragons the way it needed to be designed for a whole new edition. It was a charmed time, really. I learned, the number of things I learned in a very short span of time about game design, collaboration, teamwork, how to solve problems in a team setting, how to play test, how to kill your darlings, all very important. That was the first thing I did. But then I wrote a book called Sword and Fist, which was a book about fighters and monks for third edition. And originally it was going to be called Fighters and Monks. And I think if I have any lasting contribution to the lore of third edition, it's the fact that I wanted to name it Sword and Fist. And so all the following books had an interesting title or moniker related to the character classes that they were explaining. That was a lot of fun to work on because we were still developing the game at the time. The game wasn't completely finished. So some of the things I worked on there were educated guesses.
Yeah, I'm going through that right now with Into the Motherlands. A lot of parallel development of this is all going to link up eventually, but we're kind of like,
I think for any game designers who might be listening to this, any people who are working in, early RPG design or want to get into it, it's important to remember that what is true at lunchtime is not true at dinner, and it surely is not true at breakfast. And that's okay. I think that's actually also a feature, not a bug, the strength of the medium, that it is so flexible.
I'm inclined to agree with you. We do have one D&D question here, which is this is a great time to insert this for Catch 23. How exciting was it to be given an opportunity to portray D&D's original and quintessential vampire lord on an officially sanctioned Ravenloft broadcast? A little show called the Black Dice Society, which if you can see here, that's a me. That's a Jason with some immaculate hair. There.
I wish I had that hairline. Actually, look at that widow's peak.
See,
those cheekbones.
I cheated by cutting my head off, so I didn't. You don't know how luxurious my locks are there. But yes.
What to say about that? A dream come true springs to mind. I played the original I6 Ravenloft module long ago. I ran it for my home D&D group, and we had never experienced anything like it. I was a fan of Gothic horror before we really had words to describe what Gothic horror really was in the mainstream vernacular. And Ravenloft informed a lot of my design thinking about role-playing games going forward after that. So to get a chance to portray that particular individual is, I think, a lifetime achievement moment for which I will be forever grateful to the Dungeon Master, Dave Walters, for giving me that opportunity, because Strahd he's a terrible, terrible thing. He's a terrible creature. He's awful. He has almost no redeeming features whatsoever. He is a terrible creature, and he wants awful things. And to be able to portray that in a way that can give enjoyment to other people because you're playing their antagonist, whom they know is awful, is, I think, a huge gift that I'm going to be grateful for forever.
I appreciate you doing it, because I know you were
I was a little reluctant.
Absolutely, you were reluctant. You were my very first choice for Strahd von Zarovich. You were reluctant. I was like, no, it's gonna be cool. I'm telling you, it's gonna be great. And what a lot of people don't realize is when we shot those epilogues with you and Aslan, we shot all of that before the show started. So it was very much, here's Strahd and what he wants, and here's Aslan and what he wants. And here's what I think the cast is going to want, and action,
Yeah, but you and Mark made it so easy. I mean, it's Mark Meir. I mean, come on.
Friend of the show, Mark Meir.
Talk about a superlative role player. It was just Mark and I having a conversation, the same conversation we've been having for who knows how long, but with makeup and prosthetics and a pretty nefarious agenda. No, really. I think the work that you did to prepare us for it and Mark's how to even describe how Mark approaches Aslan. Wholesale commitment, I think, is the phrase that comes to mind. Made it easy. But it was challenging because we didn't know anything about the characters at the time. We knew their names and we knew sort of maybe where they might go. But I think it works. And I think that those scenes really, even today, after all that's happened to those characters on Black Dice Society, those scenes hold up. And not only that, there is foretelling in them. There is foreshadowing of what is still yet to come that I don't think we could have planned if we tried.
I agree. I keep telling people that there's stuff in those things all the way back. Like I just like we're about to pay off something that was in the first episode. This last week we paid off something that was in the second episode. That there's been my hope is that, in a couple of years somebody goes back and watches the show and binges the whole thing and sees how many times like events were foreshadowed, stories were foreshadowed, sometimes product lines were foreshadowed. And I was just like, here you go. Here's just mentioning these things. So it's been really wonderful because what I haven't told people quite often is what I'd conceptualized, and I told you this. I conceptualized the Black Dice Society as the Rogue One to Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
The events before Curse of Strahd that would then inform that. And along with
Curse of Strahd be like if you had all these foreshadowing events first. So that by the time the characters get to Barovia, they have all this history and these, terrible conundrums to solve.
But I wanted to be able to show people the true power and terror of Strahd von Zarovich, which is why I needed you.
I don't know. I still wonder. He's really awful. He's arguably the worst character I've ever played. And that's
we're not done being bad with him. But you think about it, he's the linchpin of a system of interdimensional prisons for terrible people. You know what I mean? And he's the foundation of that.
Sure. So he's the chairperson of the terrible individuals club of Ravenloft, right? He wants awful things, and his flaws are so deep and so irreparable that no matter what he does, he's just awful. So I'm looking forward to what happens next, but I don't want to give anything away.
It's true. I'm using cloud memory there on the audience.
If any Black Dice Society players are watching, I did not say this. I was not here.
We've been blessed to have a number of questions. I'm just kind of going to go down the list here. So some of these might be a little, they might be a little scattershot now. This is from Tim Panic Moth. You have an amazingly light touch as a storyteller while at the same time intervening with precision and grace when necessary. How did you develop that style and balance?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate it. Anyone who runs tabletop RPGs on streams or at home or any place at all, I think probably has a difficult time stepping outside themselves and seeing it objectively like that. When we started LA by Night, B. Dave and I had been on live camera together once before. I'd run exactly one two streaming. Well, I pre-recorded a game once, and then had been on live streaming just that one time. So I didn't really know what I was doing, and I decided I will just run this game the way I run all my tabletop games. My job is to speak for the world, to advocate for what the world wants. And since we're playing in the world of darkness, it wants terrible, terrible things. And to present players with opportunities for action. Everything that happens in the world is an opportunity for the players to respond. But I do not know what they will choose to do. So it seemed to me the best approach would be to present those opportunities and then just step back and let the players decide how they would respond. And then I would return to the action when it seemed, what shall we say, dramatically appropriate. I do not think I could claim that I planned to do that consciously. It's simply the way I run all my stories, whether it's D&D or Vampire or Call of Cthulhu or what have you. It works for me. It is not the necessarily best way to run a story or the only way by any means. As long as you're having fun and consent and safety is observed, you're doing it right.
I will say, I have seen the truth of this is, so many times DMs and storytellers roll dice behind the screen just to mess with people. But when you're rolling dice, you're really doing something back there. Like, you're not just doing it to scare us.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I realized all the way back in season 1 that probably a lot of viewers would assume that I was doing it just for effect, that they couldn't see behind the screen. Recently, I revealed what I'm really doing. And I have a number of different trackers that I keep behind the screen. I have masquerade threat levels. I have character drama danger levels. I have all these different health trackers that I keep behind the screen. And at different points, I roll dice based on what I see happening at the table compared to what I know the NPCs want or what the world wants. And I let the dice decide where the story goes from there. There is a reason. I think that's probably worse, knowing that.
It's worse.
If I were a player and I knew that.
I don't know if you noticed, like, later scenes, there's more than once we're having a scene and you start rolling and I'm like...
If I were a player, I would find that to be far more disturbing than just, random dice rolling for effects. Like, oh, something is actually happening.
I can verify it's worse.
It's worse.
Have another one from Rex Verde. Is there a city you would want to run a show in that you haven't had the chance to visit yet?
Oh, so many. There are so many cities in the world that deserve to be visited. The list is too long. Shall I choose my top 3?
You know what? I'm gonna give you the next question because the answer of these two may or may not synchronize. So Rex Verde was like any cities you haven't done yet. Primer Pate asked, are you considering doing another show like LA by Night after this season is over? Either VTM or another game, possibly in another city. So I will let you parse what, if anything, you would like to say about either of those.
Well, let me answer the question literally first. I'm never not thinking about doing, another stream or another show. There's just too much in the world that demands to be explored through the lens of tabletop role-playing games. So I don't think a day goes by when I'm not making some note about something I've seen, heard, or observed, or that someone has said that I think would make a really interesting story or scenario. So the answer is yes. I'm constantly thinking about that. I think what you were really asking, the question I think you're asking is, do I have any plans that are firm enough to talk to you about what happens after LA by Night concludes the season? And the answer is no, I don't. Not today. But in the future, who knows?
Which leads to the next question by Subu's Online. Sorry for butchering everyone's names here. Is there any chance the cast of LA by Night will play new vampire stories in the future? Which that one I will answer. You gotta wait and see what happens to us at the end of this one.
Bold of you to assume that everyone emerges unscathed in a condition in which they would ever want to
of
sit at my
you
table again.
to assume. Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
Ask again in 2 more episodes when this chronicle is done.
let's hold that thought. Presuming they all want to play with me again someday, then I think there's always that chance.
I
don't know. I don't know though.
I reserve the right to make no comment. Geth FML. We're going to see the undisputed Baron of the Valley and friends placed in the canonical text moving forward in 5e Vampire. One of the most beautiful things this time was seeing Strauss. Huge props to Jason and Nines come to life after all these years.
I mean, the short answer is yes. These events are already part of the canonical tapestry of Vampire the Masquerade. What we see in LA by Night, always remembering the unreliable narrator, are part of Vampire the Masquerade history forever. Baron Victor Temple exists in Vampire the Masquerade canon. He is part of lore now. I mean, he has his own lore sheet. These characters are part of the indelible story going forward.
We have a few more questions, and I don't want to take too long on this because I want to make sure we can get to them. But
I hear it's your show.
That more than anything, though, just getting to establish a link in the chain of continuity has been the most beautiful thing in the whole world. That when we were bringing LA by Night back, we knew it was to reintroduce the game to old fans, but to introduce the game to a whole new generation of people that didn't know what it was.
Yeah, very much so.
I took so seriously the fact that it's like I'm going to get to speak for Clan Ventru. So much so, I told you in the book, where is it? It's buried under 2 books. I'm not gonna read it because we don't have time. But in the Ventru chapter, there is a note to a young Ventru. And after it was confirmed that I was going to get to do it and I was going to get to play Ventru, I read that note to a young Ventru and literally got emotional about it because I was like, like, I'm really going to get to do it. Like the clan of kings. Yeah, so it's thank you for that. Thank you for that. This is, I got to be careful. I'll get emotional about it right now. Stop it. I'm hardcore. For Capybara Adrift, when the party does something that takes you completely by surprise, what do you find is the most important thing to keep things immersive and build on the fly?
That is an excellent question. Really inspired. I'm going to give you a really quick 2-part answer. The first part is always say yes and. Don't say no. Don't stop the action. Don't try to steer it the way you thought it should have gone. Don't attempt to subtly influence events so that it goes back to the notes that you prepared of the carefully constructed scenario you thought was going to happen, but is now completely irrelevant. Say yes. Say, yes, that is cool. That's interesting. Let's explore that. And here is the next part. Yes, and has of course been popularized, I think, by many excellent RPG designers as an essential tool in the Game Master's kit, but I can't emphasize enough how necessary it is to go forward with that tool in your hands at all times, especially when things don't go as you planned. The next thing I think that is super important when that situation arises is to come to the table prepared, know what the world wants, know who the key NPCs are, and what do they want. What is their ambition? What is their goal? What is their desire? What will they do to achieve these things? What lines will they not cross? Or do they think they will not cross to get these things? If you know that, you will be prepared for 95% of situations that occur in the story, even if they are beyond your most wild imaginations. Knowing what the Camarilla characters want and what they're prepared to do to get it helps me react when Victor Temple does something wildly unexpected, or Annabelle, Nellie, Jasper, X, Eva take things in a completely new direction. It's easy to adjust if you already know what the world desires.
I 1,000% agree with you, because
not as easy as it sounds, but it's useful.
Well, people ask me, like, how do I react so quickly to things? And I'm like, because I understand my
Sure.
character. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to do what Victor would do. And I've shared with you all before. The line between who Victor is and who I am is thin and highly perforated. So it's not a
You
big jump. But any character I play,
don't say.
I know them. So when you're like, this happens, this is their reaction. You know? What I will say, when I am dungeon mastering or storytelling, my
Mhm.
personal style is when I don't know or when I'm surprised, I ask myself, what is the worst possible outcome of the thing they've done? And then I do that thing.
Well,
you know? Just,
in those instances, I have sometimes allowed that to occur, and sometimes I have saved those circumstances for later because I knew I would have an NPC coming up. Like, I don't have to do anything because Brian Deckard is in the next episode, and I'll just let Vannevar deal with this.
Thank you for your mercy. I'm just saying, sometimes sheriffs got to go off rooftops. Um, will there be any kind of streamed debrief or after show once this final season is done?
We are thinking about how we want to do that. My colleague Martina Zick, who is our World of Awareness community developer, has proposed several ideas for how we could hold some sort of after party for the family, perhaps on our official Discord using the stage feature. We'll have more information about that as soon as possible. But yes, it seems to me very fitting that there should be some sort of family farewell, and maybe a chance to ask more questions, which we may or may not answer. I could vague that up for you if you need.
You know, no, that was sufficiently vague. Some of these I'm gonna skip because I know the answer would either not be forthcoming or unfulfilling. But this is a lot of NDA bullet questions we give. Like, are you gonna do this thing? Like, are you gonna do this thing? Yeah.
Don't know. Who
Uh,
knows? Ask Hester. She's the Ask X.
X is the seer, right?
Here.
This is from Hell's Hiker. Is the VTM system the best for running horror roleplay, or do you think Cthulhu, GURPS, or 5e are comparable?
Oh gosh. Again, I'm going to try to answer the question that I think you're asking, and forgive me if this is not specifically what you're asking. There are innumerable role-playing game systems, and they range in complexity from the Byzantine to the incredibly simplistic. And they all do something well. I think the best system to choose for horror or any genre is the system that gives you and your players the most fun. Mm-hmm. I don't think that I think the storyteller system is excellent at doing some things. Mm-hmm. I think that there are other systems that do other things equally well. Mm-hmm. If I want to run, cosmic horror from beyond the eldritch borders of space and time, I'm probably going to turn to Call of Cthulhu because it does that very, very well. But if I want to run, a very super intimate story about horror in the drawing rooms of Regency England, I might turn to Good Society instead. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to find the system that works for you and your players. Vampire the Masquerade and the Storyteller system work extraordinarily well for the specific types of stories they're designed to tell. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily the best systems to use for all horror, because horror is a big tent genre. Mm-hmm. It's as big as science fiction, as big as fantasy, easily as big as the thriller. It encompasses many smaller subgenres. Each of those subgenres has a different way to approach stories. So many systems for every taste and style.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you have to ask yourself too. It's what is the system simulating? Because
what are you trying to do here? You want to try to be a vampire,
right? Because
Vampire the Masquerade is a safe bet.
A story where you're fighting oncoming zombie hordes is different than you can't trust your own senses.
That's completely different. But if you want to merge high fantasy and gothic horror, obviously D&D 5th edition, especially with the new Ravenloft book, is really extraordinarily fulfilling way to play.
I will say, stopping well short of calling anything the best, because everything Jason just said is true. It's what are you trying to do? Who are you playing with? What are you going to enjoy? I will say the core element of horror is tension. And the greatest engine for tension I've ever found is dread. You think that Jenga tower, you're like, it's just a Jenga tower, it's no big deal.
Man.
It gets so real so quick, because what ends up happening, and what I was shocked to find, is you very quickly stop caring about whether or not you're going to knock the tower over. And you start caring about the fact that it's like, wait, but my pull has made it worse for the next person.
For the next person.
So you
How do I feel about that?
You start trying to play 3 and 4 moves ahead. That it's like, I can go here, and they can go here, and they can go there, and it compounds so fast. So just a pure device of
it's heart pounding, and one day I will forgive Ivan Van Norman for it all, but not today.
Not today. It is not this
today.
Day.
Is not that day.
Two more. From Primer Paid again. Would you consider showing us a peek behind your storytelling screen after LA by Night is done?
Sure. I have a number of essays in mind that I'd like to write, time and scheduling and other factors being willing, that I think it would just be fun to share with the family about how we approach this, about what I do with all those trackers behind the screen, how I prep for a session. They might help storytellers, and it might inspire other storytellers to share ideas that they have that would help me.
I will tell you also, I know if
my notes are a bit of a nightmare.
If I know I'm about to do something major, I do my best to tip off the storyteller. Like, spoiler alert, everyone, season 1, episode 4. I came to you during the break, and I was like, if we kill Abrams, will it mess up the story? And you told me, you're like, I don't know if you can kill him. I was like, that's not what I'm asking.
That's not the question.
If we kill Abrams, will it mess up the story? And you told me no. But I still wanted you to have that, like BT Dubs, this is where
it was a great example of collaboration on the fly.
Yep.
And about the value of disclosure in talking about character plans and ambitions. And I think I'll say something I rarely say. I think the best stories at the table are those that the players can't mess up, because we play to find out what happens. Mm-hmm. And I am a fan of my players, and I'm a fan of their characters, and I want them to have awesome moments. I don't necessarily always want them to get what they say they want.
Word is, this is a storytelling game of personal horror.
That's a different thing. But I want them to be able to make choices based on the world that I'm presenting without worrying about whether they're going to mess up my story. That's not possible. Yep. That's funny, because a lot of our guests who play NPCs often ask me the same thing. If I do this, will it screw things up? Will it mess up your story? And the answer is always no. You can't mess up the story, because the story is whatever happens while we're playing. It has to be that way. Last
question from Jemerson. Would you please share your concept of the beast as a player or as an NPC? What I think they're asking is, how you personify our beasts when they come up.
So how I role play the beast, or how I personify them, is not part of Masquerade lore. You won't find that in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition or in any previous edition. There are some hints in some fiction, some Vampire the Masquerade fiction that talks about individual characters hearing different voices in their heads about the beast, but it's not part of the rules and it's not part of the lore. I took inspiration from another World of Darkness game, Wraith, the Oblivion, in which each player character has a shadow, sort of an evil twin, although that's giving short shrift to the concept. The notion I had was that the beast was both internalized, very internalized, and also externalized, so that each character would hear the beast in their minds. No one else could hear it, but the beast would speak in the voice of perhaps their sire who brought them into the unlife, or a special victim, or somebody that was important to them when they were alive. Or maybe even more horrifyingly, they would never know who the beast's voice was. Maybe some days it would be their sire, and other times it would be the victim of their diablerie, or even a living mortal relative. And I wanted to do that to show that it's inescapable. To play a vampire is to explore this razor's edge between beast and humanity. And one of the best ways I could think of to do that was to bring the beast into the game as an externalized voice heard internally. Again, a longer answer than I think you wanted.
But no, it's a wonderful answer. I wish we had more time to dive into it, but I got this button and I have to add it on here. Was there any beasts, any of the players' beasts in LA by Night that you particularly enjoyed playing?
Well, it's always fun to pretend to be Taliesin Jaffe. I mean, who does not want to be
whom among us? Whom's?
I mean, who can say that they do not want to be Taliesin? So it was always fun to try to portray Carver accurately in the way that I can see. I mean, Carver is, other than Strahd, Carver is arguably the worst character I've ever created. I didn't create Strahd; I'm merely portraying him. Mm-hmm. But I developed Carver and handed it off to Taliesin, and I said, "Do your worst." And well, we all see the result. Legendary. To try to reflect a creature of that complexity in real time in a way that is convincing to both the player receiving the voice, Erica, and also to, our audience, our viewers, I think is really challenging. So I always enjoyed that. I had thought about making Victor's voice Fiorenza at one point, but I think that shall remain a mystery for now.
This, got to save something for the sequel, right? Jason, thank you so much. I will just say, since we mentioned Wraith there at the end, if you haven't seen it, Wraith Echoes of New York is a 4-part story that I told on Q Times. It's up on YouTube. It was spectacular. If you want to see just them being truly terrible to each other as each other's shadows, it was jaw-dropping, some of the things they said and did to each other over that 4-episode series.
Obviously, pretty intense game.
Yeah, it's a lot. Obviously, LA by Night's on right now. We have 2 episodes to go. Matt Mercer is on with us this Friday at 8 p.m. PST. But beyond that, and in the meantime, Mr. Carl, where can people find you?
I am Vampires en Vino in all places, on all the channels. The name combines vampires and wine, 2 of my favorite things. So I'm super easy to stalk.
Makes sense.
Not that I would encourage you to stalk.
No. It's, again, the masquerade must be maintained. Of course, we have Heroes of the Plane tomorrow night here on Demiplanar at 6 p.m. PST. And this weekend, on Friday and Saturday, we will be doing a lot of streaming content for GameholeCon, up to and including I will be running a game of Vampire Friday at 2 Central, I think. Time is an illusion. Please double check. I think I just told you the right thing. I don't know, but it is going to happen. So follow, subscribe, do all of those things so you can get notified when we're on. And we will be back here next week. We're going to try it again with Brendan Lee Mulligan. We're going to give it a shot again to see if we can get Brendan in here. So in the meantime, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.